G'day guys, Ross here in the kitchen. Now today I'm going to demystify the noble art of homebrew. And I'm not talking the one where you boil up your own hops and do it very traditionally. I'm talking about taking one of these tins here, doing a primary fermentation in a barrel and a secondary fermentation in a bottle and making your own homebrew. Now, I'm not a big drinker, but when I do buy some beer, it's going to cost me $55 to $60 for a slab of 24 of these. Depending on which brand I get, I can make 60 bottles for $15 or 25 cents each. So $2.50 at the bottle-o or 25 cents at home. So that's a very, very big difference. And it's a big incentive to try making your own. Pretty straightforward process. I'm going to take you through what the process is. I'll show you what equipment we need, what consumables we need, how to do it, and then the end result. So to start with, we're going to need one of these. Now, I've got here a Cooper's Pale Ale, which I make fairly often. That's a real ale. And then I've also got this Woolworths brand lager. So ale, lager, pilsner, bitter, stout. You can make homebrew lemonade, alcoholic and non-alcoholic. You can make ginger beer. There's a whole range of different beers you can get. So get one of these, they're 1.7 kilos, and they come with, under the cap, a sachet of yeast. The right type of yeast, the right amount of yeast. So you're gonna need one of those. This was $11, this was $19. On top of that, you're gonna need some sugar, or you may not. I'll tell you about that. A couple of bucks, and some seals. Not the ones that play with the balls and go, We're gonna need some crown seals. And they come in different colours, lots of different colours. I recommend gold or silver. And the reason for that is because when I'm finished, I'm going to write on the top so I know this is ale made on the 14th of December 2024. Nice and simple. Right, we're going to need some equipment. This is a brew barrel, about 25, 30 litres. I've got two of these. I've got a bigger one as well. It's got a tap on the bottom. It's got a hole on the top with a rubber grommet. Now inside of that goes one of these. This is an airlock. We popped it in there and we're going to fill it with water up to the lines. And the reason for that is because when we put all of this in here for the primary fermentation, we're going to put in our brew, water, yeast and sugar. And that's going to produce three things. It's going to produce a sediment that's going to sink to the bottom. We'll see that. The yeast is going to eat the sugar and produce alcohol. And the third thing is we're going to have waste gas. That's going to go boop, boop, boop. So if you do this inside, prepare for the place to smell like beer for a few days. I tend to do this in the shed. If you don't have this and natural air just gets into the brew, you can get the wrong type of yeast in here. So there's yeast just in the air. And if you get the wrong type of yeast in here, you can't just chuck in a tub of yogurt and hope for the best. It doesn't work that way. You know what I'm talking about. Right, so primary fermentation, we do that. We let it bubble away for about a week, and then we're going to put one of these things onto here. That is called a bottle filler-upperer. It's probably called something else, but that's what I'm going to call it. Also, when I've filled my bottle up, I'm then going to put in additional sugar, and this is important. You need to do this. And I've got a sugar scoop here. This will give me 3.5 grams for this size bottle. It'll give me 7 grams for a long neck. You don't have to use these. You can buy little sugar drops in the homebrew section. All they are is sugar. And this is a much cheaper way of doing it. So those sugar drops cost you extra money for the convenience. I would rather just fill it up. You're going to need that. Long-handled spoon is useful, but not essential. Also, you can get a Born meter. It's one of these. This measures the relative density of liquid. And in the top here, we've got, from there to there, it says beer, start and finish. And you pop that in and you let it settle, and the level tells you your alcoholic content. I don't bother using it. I'll tell you why in a minute. But if you want it, great. If you want to be scientific. Last thing we're going to need is a capper. So you put your cap on your bottle once it's full, and you use one of these cappers. Now, I do not like this one. I'd sold all my equipment, which I've done a few times, and then when I started homebrewing again, I got this. The problem is that when you put it down and you put pressure on it, all you've got to do is be slightly uneven, and you'll either snap the bottle off, or you'll put a hairline crack in which you won't notice until you go to drink the beer, at which point you take the top off with a bottle capper and it'll either snap off or you're drinking flat beer because that hairline crack allows the gas to escape. I much prefer these. This is a much better bottle capper. 2 reasons. The first one is that I can press this button in here and I can simply go up and down, very simple, and that allows me to do different sized bottles. So very, very simple to use. So you've got a little magnet under there, put your cap on, put your bottle on, and then cap's on and it's airtight. So when you fill this with beer and you put the extra sugar in, that is going to go through secondary fermentation, tiny bit of sediment, 0.3% alcohol, that's important, and gas. But this time, of course, the gas can't escape, and that forms the carbonation of your beer. Okay, so that's important. By the way, when you get these, they come with holes. Screw them straight onto a piece of wood. Otherwise, if you try and use them without the wood, they'll just fall over every time you try and use one. That's the basic process. What we're going to do now is actually open one of these up, add some sugar, add some water, add some yeast, and we're actually going to make it. Right, let's get into it. So step 1 is we take our brew barrel and we open it up and we realise it's been sitting in the shed for 3 months and it's covered in dust. So a good wash inside and outside, and that includes trying to flush out your tap as much as possible, lots of hot soapy water. And what you'll see here when we open it, it's like a molasses, quite a thick syrup. We'll put that in, we'll put in plenty of hot water. And we'll see that in just a second. There we go, hot water, melt it all down, pop it in, do that again and make sure you get all of that into that barrel. That's all of your flavour. And here comes your second ingredient. And let's talk about this. Now this is your sugar. A lot of people when they do homebrew, the first homebrew, they say, oh, I'll put in lots of sugar and make it really alcoholic. Now I'm normally the opposite. When I make an ale, I don't put any sugar in, at least the primary fermentation, because if you don't put any sugar in, the sugar in that syrup will make about 3% alcohol in the primary fermentation. And in the secondary fermentation, which is what happens in the bottle, it'll make 0.3%. So you'll end up with, if you put no sugar in, about 3.3%. Now, if you put in half a kilo of sugar, that adds about 1%. So it's going to be 4%, or a full kilo, it's going to make 5%, plus your 0.3, 5.3%. And that's a full strength, and I'm more than happy with that. So now I'm just filling this up with filtered water, which is obviously better than the tap water. It's tepid. I want to get it to 26 or 28 degrees. You'll see there's a temperature scale on the side there. I'm going to put in 20 litres, not the 23, which is a full batch, because it'll froth up for the first day, then it'll settle down. So then I'll put the extra 3 litres in, and then it'll soak that froth back into the mix. This is the entire sachet of yeast going into some of that liquid. I'll put in a teaspoon of sugar in a second, which will help it activate, and that'll take about 15 minutes. The thing you don't see me doing this, but I have done, is I've also added a kilo of Passionfruit in this, and I've done that before quite successfully. I really like the extra little bit of flavour it puts in. I've also tried chilies and things like that. That does add about an extra 50 grams of sugar, so it won't make a lot of difference, but just be aware of it. And look at that. That yeast is now very active. It's blown up just like basically it would in bread. So I'm going to just pour that straight in. There we go. And I'm just going to hold that and flush that out. I'm not going to get my fingers in there. So I'll just recap. We've got our mix in the bottom, our molasses type mix. We've got water. We've got our yeast. We've got the sugar. Depends on how much you want to put in there. And I've also added in some passion fruit. I'm going to put the top on this. And then what we're going to see, probably in a few hours, is that yeast starts to eat through the sugar. We're going to see that bloop, 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 and those waste gases are going to start escaping. Now, I'm going to leave this for about 5 days. This depends on the weather, amongst other things, and how much sugar you've got in there, what other ingredients you've got in. But generally, about 5 days. Day 4, I'll give it a really big stir, make sure there's no sugar trapped under the sediment. And then on day 5, I'm going to decant this into a second barrel. And at the same time, I'm going to put a sieve there so that none of that passion fruit makes it into my bottles, which I do not want. Then I'll leave it 24 hours. And then what I'm going to do is actually bottle it. And at that point in time, we'll show you how it's done. So it's been a week now. We've fermented, done the primary fermentation. I've put it into this second barrel, which you can see is actually a bigger one. And this one's actually got litres on the side. I've got my very, very clean bottles here. Now these have been to the dishwasher and I've checked every one of them. What I need to do now, I'll show you this right here. This is your little scoop. And if you dip that into your sugar, give it a tap. You see around the other side there, bit of a tap just to level it off. And that is 3.5 grams of sugar. So I'm going to go through and put that in every one of these. And if you forget to put sugar into any of those bottles, it won't go through secondary fermentation and you'll end up with a flat beer. So you can see the setup I've got here. I'll take out the airlock and that'll allow air to flow in. And what I'll do now, you'll see this fill up. Now, once I turn that carefully, you'll see that fill up. Okay, so that's full with beer. When I press this little plunger up, which is going to happen when I push this bottle up, that'll release the little valve there and allow beer to flow down into the bottle. And you'll see that. Let's find a clear bottle. Here's one. So you can see that as soon as I go like that, it releases. So very, very straightforward process. Slow it down a little bit and done. This is the part that actually takes the longest. It takes probably 20 seconds per bottle. So you're going to be sitting here for 20, 30 minutes doing this. And as I said, some people do find a little bit mucking around doing this, but really it's not such a big job. And there we go, just about done. 64 bottles I got out of this batch. And now the last step, which is capping them. Pop like that, find the right height, that's already set, and it's done. You see there's quite a lot of sugar, give them a shake it all up, and that just leaves the very, very last step, other than drinking. The last step is I'm going to write on the top, Passionfruit Lager, 10th of the 3rd, 25. All right, so these are now going to sit for minimum 6 weeks, but the reality is we're getting into winter then, so this is really next spring or even summer. And those flavours will continue to develop over that period of time. So at 6 weeks it's drinkable, but only just. Reality is give it 6 months and you're going to have a pretty nice drop. Now, let's cap the rest of these. This is actually the fastest part of the process. It probably takes about 5 seconds per bottle. So you're doing this in about 6 minutes, start to finish. Pretty straightforward. I did mention getting those light caps so they're easy to write on rather than a dark red or blue. And there you go, we're all done. And there's your process start to finish. Now today I've shown you how to do your primary fermentation in your barrel, your secondary fermentation in your bottle, and then it's drinkable. Now the stuff I'm drinking today is only about 2 months old and it's quite nice, quite refreshing. It's the end of summer, it's the start of autumn actually, and this stuff isn't bad at all at 2 months. However, what I've just put down, which has got fruit in it, it's going to take a bit longer for that flavour to develop. So I'm going to leave that all over winter, and that's an early summer drink. As far as your equipment goes, look, I would suggest don't go out and buy a whole lot of new stuff. Go and look at Gumtree or Facebook Marketplace. That's where I picked up recently that good capper. The barrel that I was using, 4 fillers, 4 airlocks, 5 packets of caps and a born meter, and the whole lot was either $20 or $30, I can't remember. Now that guy was just selling all his gear and you see that all the time, and so you can pick everything you would need up from anywhere from $20 to maybe $60 or even $70. Even so, pretty cheap. You do 2 brews and it's well and truly paid for itself. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight. I thank you for your time, and until next time, happy brewing. See ya.